It's official. Canada recognizes a Palestinian state. To help break down what it all means and what could happen next, I'm joined by Speer, my co-founder and editor-at-large here at The Hub. Well, Sean, we knew this was coming. It was telegraphed back in the summer, but we are out with a statement from the Prime Minister recognizing, under a series of conditions that we can get into, Canada's intention to recognize a Palestinian state. What do you make of the moment?
Yeah, I think as we've discussed when the Prime Minister first signaled that this would be his government's policy over the summer months, that there's just something that doesn't sit right about this, Roger, that one way I've come to think about it is if you would have told Hamas on October 6th that the consequences of their horrific terrorist attack would be recognition of Palestinian statehood, the esteem and reputation of Israel diminished in national capitals, particularly in Europe, and the West generally fracturing on these issues, Hamas leadership would have said that this amounts to success. And in that sense, it just, as I say, doesn't sit well that the Canadian government, along with European allies, are essentially giving Hamas that sense of success.
Yeah, I do urge our listeners and viewers to go and Google and read the Prime Minister's statement. It surprised me, Sean, in terms of how kind of emotional the language is in the statement. On one hand, and give credit to the government, there are some very frank and clear denunciations of Hamas. It says, for example, that Hamas has terrorized the people of Israel and oppressed the people of Gaza, wreaking horrific suffering. I think that was an important thing to say. Then, though, again, as we know, there's this on the one hand, this, on the other hand, that type of formulation and structure that always seems to insert itself into how officialdom in Canada chooses to talk about Israel in this conflict. It goes on to say something that kind of surprised me. It in a sense says, I'll put in parentheses, Israel caused a devastating and preventable famine in Gaza, again in parentheses, in violation of international law. I mean, that's quite a statement. I think no one would doubt that the people of Gaza are suffering horribly in this war, and that civilian casualties have been and are too high. But to suggest that there is a large-scale famine underway, it is regrettably, and it's horrible to have this conversation in 2025, but it is itself a subject of debate. It is not a fact that there is a widespread famine underway in Gaza. And for the government to come out and say this, again, just suggests a kind of a lack of coolness, of a ability to kind of see through this immediate and horrible conflict to, I don't know, some future for the region, two-state or not. It seems very caught up, Sean, this statement in the moment and, frankly, in the politics of the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right, Rudyard. Listen, as you said, this war is awful. War is awful. But what does one expect from Israel after being subject to this horrific attack that undermined the country's much-needed deterrence, took its citizens hostages, some of whom remain held in Gaza, God knows where, and to have on its border a terrorist organization that comprises the government committed to its destruction. Most of the acts that we've seen out of Israel are, in that context, I think, mostly justified. One can be a Monday morning general, and no doubt there will be a lot of efforts in the years to come to analyze the Israeli response. But what struck me about the motion, from the statement, is just a lack of reckoning with the why this is all played out, and that the kind of moral equivalence embedded in the prose that you just read As I say, it doesn't sit well with me, and I suspect doesn't sit well with a lot of Canadians.
Yeah. Let's go to some of the kind of technical aspects of the statement, because there's a lot of people that I think have commented that there are requirements here, if and when and should this recognition proceed, that frankly will be very difficult for really any of the parties to achieve. And first and foremost is a contention on the part of the Prime Minister that recognition of a Palestinian state will only happen in the context of the Palestinian Authority being in power. This is the political party of Abbas, who himself, Sean, has not had elections since 2006, over 19 years. And here we have, a requirement that this party that hasn't had an election in 19 years should be the governing party and authority of the PA. That's a debate. And second, if you haven't had elections in 19 years, why do you think you're going to have elections now? What's your reaction to that? Again, it just seems to be both convenient on one hand for the government, because maybe they never have to move forward with the recognition of a Palestinian state. And then on the second hand, I mean, let's be honest about who the interlocutor is. The Palestinian Authority is a deeply undemocratic, corrupt, and I guess, I don't know, Sean, maybe you have to work with what you got, but this statement seems to envision that there are no other pathways, that there isn't some other authority that could be created that's not the PA, that could lead the people of Palestine to a better place.
Yeah, this is precisely where I hope the conversation would go. So I'm glad you've taken us there. You almost get the sense, Rudyard, that the government was so committed to recognize the Palestinian state, either for geopolitical reasons or domestic ones or whatever factors influence that choice, that the question of, okay, well, how does that work? What does a governance arrangement look like was secondary. And as a consequence, it is investing a ton of hope and trust in the Palestinian Authority that strikes me as unjustified. You almost, at various points in the statement, it says things like, well, they've assured us that this is going to happen, or they've assured us that that this will be a government that doesn't have Hamas, for instance, represented. You know, you get the sense that they're treating Abbas like some kind of democratic leader outside his country who the goal is to bring back in and restore peace and democracy. This is at best a kind of complex political actor, and I think in a lot of ways, Roger, it comes to my main point that this reflects the extent to which this is an announcement motivated by some sort of passions, and in a way suspending the kind of difficult truths that real world powers have to grapple with. They don't get to just do foreign policy by statements. They have to do foreign policy as it exists on the ground. And that, I think, in many ways is the most objectionable part of what's come out of the Carney government. It's like we get all the upside of making this small p progressive announcement, and we'll leave it to the real players, the real powers, to figure out precisely what a post-Hamas Gaza looks like.
Yeah. As part of this statement, it says Canada will intensify efforts to support the Palestinian Authority's implementation of a reform agenda on which progress has already been made. I don't know. I certainly haven't seen that progress. Recent opinion polls show that the support in the West Bank of Hamas versus the PA is almost 2-1. Obviously, Hamas doesn't have a majority of support in the West Bank, but public opinion polling this year shows that Hamas outpolls the PA at a rate of 2-1, and still in Gaza, despite the destruction that in large part has been wrought on the Palestinians in Gaza due to Hamas, if not the majority of the pain and suffering that these innocents have endured is the inability of Hamas to lay down its arms and release the hostages and concede that it doesn't have a future in Gaza, a prerequisite of Canada's recognition of a Palestinian state, Hamas still enjoys close to majority support. Again, imperfect polling in a war zone, but that's what the most recent indications suggest. So, Sean, I agree with you. I feel like we're counting angels here on the head of a pin. It clearly is a kind of luxury belief of small, insignificant countries like Canada that don't actually have to make hard decisions about how to get hostages home, how to bring wars to an end. Instead, we can build, I don't know, castles in the air and imagine a future of peace. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want a two-state solution where these two people come together and reconcile and find a way forward through peace and understanding? But Sean, I kind of throw up my hands here, literally, for our YouTube viewers. This statement seems so far away from the facts on the ground, where even today we see a request from Hamas to President Trump that in turn for a 60 or 90-day truce, they will release half the hostages. They're still negotiating, Sean. They're still negotiating.
Yeah, well, it comes to then to the point, what's behind this? What is the impetus to recognize a Palestinian state at this time? It's always been understood that that would be done as part of a broader negotiation. And here we have Canada and a small number of European players preemptively doing it. And I think in some ways, Rudyard, and this is the most worrying part, is the subtext here that this is less about rewarding Gazans and more about punishing Israeli government and Israelis more broadly. And I just don't, if you would have told me on October 7th that within a couple of years the Canadian government would be enacting policy to effectively punish Israel in the aftermath of the country's most horrific attacks, according to some measures, the most horrific attacks on Jews since the Holocaust, I would have said, no way. This would have been precisely the moment for us to stand shoulder to shoulder with our liberal democratic ally in the region. And there's just, as I say, I've used the language, something doesn't sit well. I'll speak more firmly. There's something kind of perverse about doing this way now, the week of Rosh Hashanah. It's just a very odd set of developments from the Canadian government, for which I think the Prime Minister owes Canadians more of an explanation.
Yeah, and the spiral continues. It seems to, in no small part, the recognition now of France, the UK, and Canada. This is seemingly pushing the Netanyahu government to come out and openly say there will not be, and there never will be, a Palestinian state. So I feel like we've tripped over our own shoelaces again. And, if there is going to be peace in this region, it is going to be the process, the work of years, possibly decades, and it's going to be about more than statements. Sean, great to have the opportunity to break this down with you today. It's an issue we'll continue to watch and write about here at The Hub, and recommend our viewers and listeners head over to thehub.ca to get all of our latest analysis and insights. Until next time, Sean, bye-bye. This video has been brought to you by Airbnb. A big thank you to Airbnb for sponsoring the Hub's YouTube channel this month. It's great to be the beneficiaries of their support. Here at the Hub, we talk a lot about the housing crisis ongoing in the country. As we know, there are people out there that think that short-term rentals are to blame for taking supply off the market. But here at the Hub, we can feel that doesn't make sense. Consider for a moment that the median number of nights an Airbnb is hosting someone in Canada as a guest is 55. These, frankly, aren't full-time rental properties. They are Canadians trying to get by like the rest of us by finding some additional income through renting out a property they own. Government data supports this. Statistics Canada recently reported the amount of Airbnbs that could actually be converted into long-term homes accounts for only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. Canada needs solutions to tackle the whole housing market, not just 0.6% of it. We agree. Learn more at airbnb.ca/closer look.